You didn't click this by accident, and no, this isn't another message you've heard before. There is a reason you are hearing this now, and not last week. Not last year. But today, for a long time, you felt it, that quiet pressure inside your chest, that strange knowing you can't explain, the feeling that something about your life doesn't add up, even though from the outside, everything may look normal. You've tried to ignore it, you stayed busy, you distracted yourself, you told yourself, maybe I'm just overthinking. But the truth is, you were never confused, you were being prepared. Most people go their entire lives without ever realizing why they feel different. Why they don't fully belong anywhere, why their path seems harder, lonelier, and slower than everyone else's. But you were never meant to live an ordinary life, and that's exactly why things didn't work out the way you expected. Think about it. How many times did you do everything right, yet still lose? How many times were you close, so close, only for everything to collapse at the last moment? You weren't being punished. You were being redirected. There are things that cannot be given to you early, because they would destroy you instead of elevate you, and this is where most people misunderstand the process. They think delay means denial, they think silence means abandonment. They think struggle means failure, but for chosen ones, delay means protection. Let me ask you something, and answer honestly, even if it makes you uncomfortable. If you had received everything you wanted 5 years ago, would you have had the discipline to keep it? Would you have had the wisdom to protect it? Would you have had the humility to carry it? Or would it have consumed you? You see, there are levels to calling. And not everyone can survive the weight of destiny. That's why your life looks the way it does. You weren't ignored, you were isolated. Isolation is not rejection, isolation is training. When others were forming shallow connections, you were learning depth. When others were chasing noise, you were being taught silence. When others were building comfort, you were building strength. And yes, it hurt. You questioned yourself. You questioned God. You questioned whether you were broken. But hear this clearly now, nothing about you is broken. What feels like loss was actually removal. What felt like abandonment was actually protection. What looked like delay was actually alignment. There are people who could never walk with you into the future you're being prepared for, so they had to exit your life early. Not because they were evil, not because you failed, but because their role was temporary. Chosen ones don't get permanent comfort, they get permanent growth, and growth doesn't announce itself, it happens quietly, painfully, slowly. That's why people underestimate you. They see where you are, but they don't see what's forming inside you. They don't see the discipline you developed when no one was watching. They don't see the emotional strength you gained from surviving alone. They don't see the spiritual awareness that was forged in silence, and they won't understand, until it's too late, because the shift that's coming in your life won't be loud, it won't be dramatic. It won't need validation, it will simply make sense. One day, you'll look back at this version of yourself, the tired one, the confused one, the doubting one, and you'll realize, this was the version that survived, this was the version that didn't quit, this was the version that stayed standing when everything else fell apart, and that's why what's coming next won't break you, it will recognize you. But before that happens, there is something important you must understand. Not everyone who is chosen is aware, and awareness changes everything. The moment you become aware, the rules change, the pressure increases, the tests intensify, the distractions multiply, because once you awaken, you become a threat, not to people, but to systems built on fear and limitation. That's why resistance increases right before alignment. If life has been unusually heavy lately, if obstacles appeared out of nowhere, if doubt has been louder than ever, you're not going backward, you're standing at the edge of a transition, and transitions are uncomfortable, because the old can no longer hold you, and the new hasn't fully arrived yet. This is the in-between. And only the strong survive here. Why isolation pressure increase when you are close? There is a moment in every chosen one's life where things begin to feel unnaturally heavy, not dramatic, not chaotic, just dense. You wake up tired even after rest, your mind feels crowded even in silence. people feel distant, even when they're physically close, and this is where most people get it wrong. They think something is wrong with them, but what's actually happening is far more precise. You are being separated from noise. Chosen ones are never isolated to be punished. They are isolated so they can hear clearly. Think about it carefully. If your life had stayed loud, if people had stayed around you, if distractions had continued, would you have ever looked inward? Probably not. Isolation is the environment where awareness is born. That's why it feels uncomfortable. That's why it feels unfamiliar. That's why it feels lonely. Because your old identity was built around interaction, validation, and reaction, and now you're being taught presence. Most people can't survive this phase. They rush to fill the silence, they chase relationships, they cling to habits, they lower their standards just to feel something. But chosen ones don't get that option. Every time you tried to escape the isolation, something stopped you. Plans fell apart, connections faded, opportunities disappeared, not because you weren't worthy, but because you weren't ready to carry them yet. You see, pressure is not random. Pressure appears when capacity is being expanded. A seed doesn't break open because it's weak, it breaks open because growth has started. And growth is violent before it's beautiful. That's why this phase attacks your mind more than anything else. Doubt increases, memories resurface, old wounds reopen, questions you buried start demanding answers. This isn't regression, this is extraction. Everything that doesn't belong in your next level is being pulled to the surface so it can leave, and yes, it feels unfair. You ask yourself, why now? Why me? Why does it feel like I'm carrying more than everyone else? Because you are. But here's the part no one tells you, not everyone is built to hold weight. Some people are built to move fast, some are built to entertain, some are built to consume, but you were built to contain depth, and depth requires stillness. That's why life slowed you down, that's why plans didn't move forward, that's why progress felt delayed, that's why waiting became your teacher. Waiting isn't wasted time for chosen ones. Waiting is where discernment develops. You learn who matters, you learn what lasts, you learn what drains you, and most importantly, you learn yourself. This is the phase where illusions collapse. You stop romanticizing people who don't show up, you stop chasing validation from those who can't see you, you stop shrinking to fit places you've already outgrown, and that's when resistance increases. Because once you stop needing approval, you become uncontrollable. People may not say it out loud, but they feel it. Your energy changes, your presence shifts, your silence becomes heavier than words, and not everyone is comfortable around someone who no longer seeks permission. That's why misunderstandings appear, that's why distance grows, that's why you feel misunderstood even when you explain yourself clearly. You're no longer speaking the same language, you're operating from awareness, and awareness is threatening to those still asleep. So life gives you space, not to punish you, but to protect you from lowering yourself again. This is where chosen ones are tested hardest, not with loss, but with loneliness, because loneliness tempts you to compromise. It whispers, just go back. Just accept less. Just settle. But if you settle here, you delay everything that's waiting for you ahead. That's why you're being asked to sit with yourself longer than others. That's why comfort is delayed, because comfort too early creates weakness, and weakness cannot carry calling. You're not being hardened, you're being refined. Refinement removes urgency, refinement removes desperation, refinement removes attachment to outcomes. And once those are gone, alignment happens naturally, opportunities stop feeling forced, connections feel effortless, decisions become clear. But before that, you must pass through this narrow space, this space where no one claps for you. This space where progress is invisible, this space where faith is tested daily, and the fact that you're still standing, still searching, still listening, means you haven't failed. You're still in the process, and the process always feels darkest right before clarity arrives. The moment everything shifts, and why you were never late, there comes a moment in the journey of every chosen one when the struggle no longer feels like chaos. It starts to feel intentional, not easy, not comfortable, but clear. This is the point where you realize something important. Nothing you went through was random. Every delay had a purpose. Every loss carried information. Every closed door protected you from something you couldn't see at the time, and now, you're standing at the edge of understanding. This is the phase where resistance softens, not because life suddenly becomes perfect, but because you stop fighting what is shaping you. You no longer ask, "Why is this happening to me?" Instead, you ask, "What is this preparing me for?" That shift changes everything. Chosen ones don't awaken all at once, they awaken in layers. First, awareness, then detachment, then responsibility. Responsibility is the part most people don't talk about, because with awareness comes accountability. You can no longer blame circumstances. You can no longer pretend you don't see patterns. You can no longer escape your own growth. That's why this phase feels heavy in a different way. It's not confusion anymore, it's clarity with weight. You know what drains you now, you know what aligns with you, you know which paths feel wrong even if they look attractive. And that's when temptation appears, not temptation of pleasure, but temptation of ease, shortcuts, quick comfort, lower standards disguised as peace. This is the final filter, because chosen ones are not tested by suffering alone, they are tested by options. Options that look safe but keep you small, options that feel familiar but limit your expansion. And here's the truth, not everything peaceful is meant for you. Some peace is stagnation wearing a calm mask. Your spirit recognizes growth even when your mind hesitates. That's why something inside you still not anxious, unsettled, because you're not meant to stop here. This is where many people misunderstand the chosen path. They think the reward is comfort. It's not. The reward is alignment. Alignment with who you truly are, not who you became to survive. That's why life stripped away distractions. That's why relationships fell apart. That's why old versions of you couldn't follow into this phase. You were being prepared to stand without leaning. Because leaning creates dependency. And dependency weakens purpose. Now you're learning how to stand alone without being lonely. There's a difference. Loneliness says, "I'm missing something." Solitude says, "I'm becoming something." And you've crossed that line. You no longer fear being alone, you fear losing yourself again. That's growth. This is also where your intuition sharpens. You sense things before they happen. You feel energy shifts in rooms. You notice intentions behind words. Not because you're suspicious, but because you're attuned. Awareness brings discernment. Discernment brings boundaries. And boundaries change how life responds to you. Suddenly, chaos avoids you. Drama doesn't stick. People either respect your space, or remove themselves. That's not loss. That's order. This is the moment where the internal work begins to reflect externally, not overnight, not dramatically, but subtly. You start trusting your timing, you stop chasing, you stop explaining yourself to those committed to misunderstanding you, and something interesting happens. Life starts meeting you halfway, opportunities feel calmer, progress feels natural, decisions stop feeling rushed, because urgency is a symptom of misalignment. When something is meant for you, it doesn't require you to abandon yourself to reach it. This is also when you realize, you were never behind, you were just early, and early feels lonely in a world that moves unconsciously. You weren't delayed, you were being calibrated, calibrated to hold responsibility, calibrated to influence without ego, calibrated to lead without control. And leadership doesn't always look loud. Sometimes leadership looks like restraint. Sometimes it looks like silence. Sometimes it looks like walking away when you could have stayed. That's maturity. That's why your path didn't look like everyone else's. You weren't meant to blend in. You were meant to anchor. Anchors don't move often, but they hold weight. And now, the phase you're entering isn't about proving anything. It's about embodying what you've learned. You won't need to announce it. People will feel it. Your presence will speak before your words. Your decisions will reflect clarity. Your life will feel intentional instead of reactive. And yes, challenges will still come, but they won't shake you the same way. Because you're no longer asking life for permission, you're walking in agreement with it. That's the shift. That's the moment chosen ones recognize themselves, not through validation, not through applause, but through inner stability. You're not here to impress, you're here to be precise, and precision requires patience. So if you're still standing here, still listening, still reflecting, know this: you didn't miss your moment. You are becoming the kind of person who can hold it when it arrives, and that's why everything unfolded exactly the way it did.